Hello everyone, today's video is a Q&A video talking today about whether MSM can be used as a biofilm disruptor, talking about Biocidin, talking about my preferred systemic antimicrobial herbs that I work with, and then also talking about the accuracy/efficacy of tests looking at brain health/infections. So I'm going to cover a lot of topics today in the Q&A. As per usual, nothing I'm saying should be construed as medical advice. This is for informational purposes only. If you need medical advice, please talk to your healthcare provider to get that advice. So the first question says, I recently watched your video about biofilms and DMSA. My question is, do you think methylsulfonylmethane, aka MSM, would work just as well or even better for biofilm busting? They're both sulfur-based compounds and both are chelating agents. Any thoughts? Also, any thoughts on a product called Biocidin? So talk about the MSM first, then move over to the Biocidin. So I don't believe that MSM, to my knowledge, MSM does not have any chelating properties to it. Now I am happy to be proven wrong. If someone has any research literature they can cite indicating that it is indeed a chelating agent, I'd be happy to see that information, and it'd be great to know that MSM is actually a chelator, because I love MSM at high dosages. I've posted videos about this. I interviewed Dr. Kathleen Janelle, who's the leading expert in high-dose MSM therapy in the world, to my knowledge, and it's awesome, but I don't believe it does any chelation. The reason I say that is because when you look at the molecular structure of chelators like EDTA and DMSA and DMPS, they have very, very special chemical structures. Yes, MSM is a sulfur-based compound, like it's 30 or 33% of its molecular weight is sulfur. DMSA is sulfur-based, DMPS is sulfur-based as well, which is why it has chelating, or that's part of its chelating property. But there are specifics of its molecular, of the DMSA, DMPS, and EDTA. There are specifics of their molecular structures that allow them to actually chelate and actually bind those metals. So just because something's sulfur-based doesn't mean that it's going to chelate. For example, glutathione. Sometimes folks will say, oh, glutathione's a chelator. To my knowledge, glutathione is not a chelator. To my knowledge, glutathione is a very important sulfur-based compound that helps with the removal of heavy metals and other toxins through our liver detox pathways, but it's not something that's specifically a chelator. To my knowledge, it helps with detox, but doesn't specifically chelate. Chelators are specifically heavy metal binders, not detox. So, whereas glutathione and other sulfur-based compounds, including alpha-lipoic acid, they are detox facilitators, but not actually chelators. It's an important distinction because I guess it's kind of like if there was say there's a swimming pool and it had a whole bunch of like fairly large rocks at the bottom of that swimming pool. You could run a pool filter and say like, hey, we're going to filter out, all the, like say little bits of, like leaves and feathers and I don't know, just random stuff that like, drops in the pool that's kind of floating around. The filter is going to work really well for that, but that filter is not going to haul those rocks out. You could run that filter all day, every day for 1,000 years. It's not going to pull those rocks out. You need to, say, swim to the bottom of the pool and just haul them out with your hands. You need to grab them. You need something that's going to grab those heavy metals, whether it's just random heavy metals or it's heavy metals that have been incorporated into those phase 2 biofilms that give it a lot of that infrastructure that make them so darn hard to get rid of. Anyways, long and short of it is I do not believe that MSM has chelating properties to it, but again, I'm happy to be corrected if somebody has information to the contrary. But in terms of Biocidin, so Biocidin is a product that I used to use all the time. Once upon a time, it was a very helpful formula, and I liked it a lot because it didn't taste that terrible. It doesn't taste great, but I used to use it in my pediatric patients a lot when we had concerns about systemic infections or just infections in general, like just colds and things like that. Like I used to use it all the time for like yeast and microbial like SIBO and LIBO, like different bacterial overgrowths in the intestinal tract for my pediatric patients, because Biocidin has glycerin in it as well as along with alcohol, and it's just not as bad tasting as our standard tinctures that we use. And for kids who can't swallow pills, got to use liquid, so it is a useful remedy. And I did use it in some adult patients as well, but I mostly just ask them to suffer through taking tinctures because I found that they pack more of a punch. I stopped using Biocidin quite a few years ago, over 10 years ago, because the price just shot up through the roof. It used to be around like $30 a bottle or something like that, which was fairly good pricing. And then, overnight, here in Canada at least, the price with the exchange rate and shipping, and there's an issue buying it directly from the supplier, it shot up to like 80 or $90 or something like that. It's just horrendously expensive in comparison. So we just found other options. So I still like Biocidin. We actually work with a blend that's not the same as Biocidin, but it was inspired by Biocidin, and we still kind of use that. We just put it together. Well, I say we in the royal sense. My wonderful staff members, put it together. We kind of mix it up here, because we mix up different herbal formulas for our patients. We make our own herbal tinctures here on site, which keeps the price point down for folks, and just gives us the luxury of just always having these things in stock, so we don't run out. But yeah, Biocidin is great. And then I know there was at least one comment on this comment saying like, I love Biocidin. Like some person said they love Biocidin. It really helps them, and I certainly have lots of colleagues who mostly in the U.S. who use Biocidin and find that it works well. So I think it's a good product. That being said, in my clinical experience, when I used to prescribe it all the time, as I alluded to earlier, I do find that just kind of pound for pound, there are other antimicrobial formulas that work better. One of the interesting things with Biocidin is that it does have some ingredients in there that are not, to my knowledge at least, not directly antimicrobial. I don't remember the formula off the top of my head. Just I've lectured about this before. So I used to lecture about Lyme and co-infections at my old naturopathic college. Did a guest lecture about that, so I anyways broke down some different formulas. And so with Biocidin, again, clinically it can be very helpful for folks, but if we want just the most like concentrated antimicrobial formula going, then I prefer other herbs for my patients. But I like Biocidin. I think it's good. That segues very nicely into the next question, because someone had posted a question saying, what are the systemic antimicrobials that I use with my patients? So I have posted dedicated videos about this in the past, so feel free to search that on my YouTube channel. Easiest way to search my videos. But just short answer is that I use systemic antimicrobial herbs that are inspired by the late great Stephen Buhner. Stephen Buhner was a herbalist. He passed away within the last few years. Really brilliant guy. Wrote amazing books, including the natural treatment for Lyme co-infections, Healing Lyme. The second edition is much more elaborate than the first one. And then these other books called Herbal Antibiotics and Herbal Antivirals. So they're all really great books. I have all of them on my shelf. I'm actually looking at two of them right now, which help me to remember the names off the top of my head. Yeah, they're awesome. So the herbs that I like the best, and I'm going to say them slowly because there's always comments saying like, what were those herbs and all of that. But you can look these up online. Just type in like Buhner herbs. Buhner is spelled Buhner, and you can look at the Buhner protocol, and there's free, like there's websites and free posts and different things like that, that you can see the list of all these different herbs. So the herbs that I like the best are Cryptolepis, Alcornia, Isatis, Houtunia, Japanese knotweed, cat's claw, and Chinese skullcap. So those are kind of my top 8. If I really suspect or know that there's neuroborreliosis or neurological involvement, then I will bring in the herb Gu Tang, which is Chinese cat's claw, and then another herb called Stephania. So those are kind of my go-to systemic antimicrobials. So I really like those and use them all the time, every day in practice, prescribe them a few times today, and they're my favorites. Let's see, and then there's a couple of other questions within that same comment. So it says, are the brain tests you mentioned a foolproof way of testing for different infections? So I recently posted a video, I don't have the name of it here, but it was something about biofilms and infections affecting the brain or something like that. So I posted that in early September, and so I mentioned a brain test. I believe I mentioned in this video a test called the Neural Zoomer Plus test, which is offered by a lab called Vibrant Wellness. So I'm just going to fix my phone there, not perched a little precariously. So I believe I mentioned that lab test in that video. I probably also mentioned that I recently posted a podcast episode where I talk about this test, and I think it's a really fascinating, very useful test. Been using it quite a bit in practice, and I really like it. So with that particular brain test, it measures viral titers. So asking about, is it a foolproof way of testing? I mean, I don't think any test is foolproof. Even like good old, like, a CBC, like a complete blood count, or like an EGFR, estimated glomerular filtration rate test for kidney function, or an ALT, for liver function, and GGT for liver function and gallbladder function. Like these tests that are like just the bread and butter of every healthcare practitioner that does any kind of lab testing. Like even those tests, like they're good, but like I've had patients where they're admitted to hospital for some reason. They're getting blood work done every single day, and like there's variation in the numbers. I've seen TSH levels for thyroid stimulating hormone. I've seen those levels like fluctuate widely, from day to day in some cases. Like there are no like absolute, like, hang your hat on them perfect blood tests. I mean, those tests are good, and they don't have like, they're not varying like, oh, it's like super, I'm anemic today and I'm totally fine tomorrow. I'm not insinuating that, but like there is going to be variability from day to day with any test that's run, for the most part, to my knowledge and in my experience. So in terms of a foolproof test, when I talk to patients about testing, I always mention, like, there are there's no perfect test, but this is the best testing that's available, and I think it's worthwhile to run for X, Y, or Z reason. With that being said, I do feel that sorry, starting again there. With respect to the NeuroZoomer Plus, it does measure a number of viral titers, and I do feel that testing is very useful, and I feel like in my experience, I feel that it's quite accurate. We're basically measuring this immune system response to these viruses, and it gives us, in my opinion, a good sense of whether the body is kind of dealing with a higher viral titer or a lower viral titer. Is this more of a recent infection, or some like kind of ongoing like more acute issue, or is this something that's longer standing? So I do feel that the testing is really valuable. There are other types of microbes that we test for besides viruses, of course. We oftentimes will use Armin labs from Germany to measure, oftentimes running ELISpot testing, sometimes serological testing, looking at other types of microbes like Borrelia, which is the Lyme disease causing bacteria, Bartonella, the Babesia parasite, Mycoplasma, etc. So Lyme and all the co-infections. That testing is not perfect. Unfortunately, a number of those tests, to my knowledge, have not been studied to the point where we know what the sensitivity and specificity is of those tests. So there's definitely limitations, and I always tell my patients about these limitations. Yet I also mention to them, or tell them, that I've seen a lot of clinical benefit, and when patients do testing, when they have a lot of symptoms, we start treating, they're feeling better. We retest, and we see the numbers coming down. We see certain infections clearing. They do seem to have the testing is very linear in my experience, and that as people feel better, numbers tend to go down. When infections resolve, numbers come back at zero. We retest sometimes down the road for various reasons. Numbers are still at zero. There are some tests that are out there that, in my experience, are very yo-yo-y. There are certain tests that I like for certain reasons, but in other aspects are a bit less predictable. Like, so for example, organic acid testing or micronutrient testing can be useful in certain capacities, but there's elements of those where it's like we might run an organic acid test and see that this level is really, really low, suggesting there's a deficiency, and then we start some treatment, and patients feel like, say, some of their mitochondrial parameters are looking really low, so we put them on mitochondrial support. They're feeling a lot better. We retest them, and their numbers are even lower. It's like, well, that doesn't make sense. Or we see that, oh, the mitochondrial numbers are really high and they're really tired, so we put them on mitochondrial support. They're feeling better, and now their mitochondrial numbers are lower. So there are certain tests that don't have a lot of rhyme or reason, but the microbial tests through like serological viral testing, like through the NeuroZoomer panel, or through the ELISpot testing or serological testing through Armin Labs, I have not found it to be like a hodgepodge kind of helter-skelter type of situation. So anyways, I could go on and on about that, but I've already gone on and on about it enough. So I'm going to leave it there for now. If you don't mind, please taking a quick moment to like, share, subscribe, and or post a quick comment on the video. I'd really appreciate it. So thanks in advance for taking a second to do that. And if you have any questions or comments about any of these topics or anything else, just post in the comment section below, and I will do my best to answer as soon